Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the SIG Azure Deep Dive. If you were in the SIG Azure intro yesterday, you had an opportunity to ask a lot of questions. We skipped straight to the question section because Azure is. We're one of those things that we're actually trying to figure out more and more about the kind of the community, the user base, and what use cases we need to kind of attract or kind of understand a little better. So my name is Stephen Augustus. I am the SIG Azure chair, in addition to Dave Strebel, who's over here. Cal is the SIG Azure Technical Lead. In addition to Peng Fei Ni, who is out in is Shanghai? Okay, all right. So straight into it. What have we been working on? So we've been making incremental improvements to the Azure code base on Kubernetes. One around pulling the in-tree Azure code out of tree, moving that to cloud provider specific repos. So that's kind of what's been happening across the board for all of the cloud providers. AWS has been working on this. IBM Cloud has been working on this, GCP. So we're starting to see this breaking down of the monolith for across Kubernetes, starting to use the Kubernetes SIGs repo more frequently. So we're broken up into Kubernetes SIGs, Kubernetes Client, Kubernetes Security, which is a secret repo, and a few others that SIGs can start placing their code in. So we're seeing the shift away from the day-to-day, how can we shove everything into core Kubernetes, and more towards how do we make sure that this is modularized in a way that we can improve code velocity for SIGs. So specifically for Azure, across the 110 to 113, I think we're officially in GA now for VMSS. So if you're familiar with availability sets or ASGs for AWS, VMSS or virtual machine scale sets are analogous to ASGs for Amazon. So we've been working on supporting, being able to support virtual machine scale sets within Kubernetes. So we're finally in a place where not only are they supported, but they also have full integration with the cluster autoscaler from the autoscaling team. Availability zones. Again, if you're familiar with running your systems in multiple regions across, again, it's analogous to the AWS construct of availability zones with the addition of having fault and zone domains. So there's support for that in Kubernetes as well. I've been working on that since 111, and I think 112? 112, and we're set to wrap in 114.
It's done.
Done? Okay.
Done.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
GA. Yeah. So as I was mentioning, cluster autoscaler. So now that we have essentially shifted away from the VMAS or virtual machine availability sets for Azure, we want to make sure that we can use the same constructs that people use across different cloud providers to be able to scale to scale your clusters. So that's baked in as the VMSS. Support went GA. Right, so you want to talk a little bit about KMS?
Yeah, sure. So part of what happened upstream was the support for external KMS to encrypt data at rest inside etcd. Now, it's very, sorry, yeah, I always, and it happened, I think, 111, and then there was this agreement on the API, and then it 110, and then there was this agreement on API, and then 111, the API was there. So we went ahead and we built an integration for this with Key Vault. What that means to you is your data, you can configure whatever data you want. So you can say encrypt my secrets, or encrypt my deployments, or encrypt my config maps, or encrypt everything. And that data is encrypted with a key that's saved in Azure Key Vault. For those who are working with enterprises such as banks, highly regulated stuff, this is really nice because Key Vault carries all the certificates that banks are looking for and those highly regulated environments are looking for. And that means that you can operate Kubernetes on Azure in a highly regulated environment. Please. Oh, I want to talk about this. Do you mind?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So who's here working for Microsoft?
Oh, shock and surprise.
Yeah. We just need a bunch of blue badge and one of those coffee machines.
Right, it's an extra ribbon, right,
yeah.
for that.
So initially, and I was one of those advocates, I said everything the cluster use should be in the same resource group. The rationale behind this is people create clusters, they delete clusters, and they don't want dangling resources. I was proven wrong right, left, and center on multiple levels. The first level, and that was solved long ago, is the resources that the cluster use are not necessarily share the same life cycle. Case in point, an IP. Static IP, you allocate some away from the resource group, that becomes an IP and you use it for whitelisting and all that the dance that you do on your firewalls. And you want to use it on a cluster A, and then you delete cluster A, create cluster B, and you use it. So if you create it in the same resource group and then you delete the resource group, you're going to have to do the dance again. So that was solved long ago, the DNSs and all of that. The last thing that we tried to do, and I think we are in beta now, is the cross-resource group nodes. What that means is the following, is snowflakes. What I mean by snowflakes is your cluster is probably running the same style of CPUs or GPUs or some configuration of memory CPU distribution or disk distribution, but you have one or two or three nodes that you want them very different. Those nodes might be running custom software such as some wacky antivirus for some compliance, or they live on-prem, or they live somewhere else, and you just want to use a control plane, be it running on your resource group or you're using one of the managed services such as AKS, and you just want to join this node to the cluster to get the benefit of a cluster, but you still want to manage it in a very different way. And that's why we started this project. And if you noticed, a bunch of people came talk to me. I'm not sure if any of them here. And this is the answer for if you want to do Snowflake's implementation. One of the folks I talked to is they do machine learning.
Right.
And they want to do, keep your cluster. We're going to run something on your cluster. And then what happens is the cluster will span B-series VMs for ML workloads. So it's a very nice use case. We're trying small step by small step to do it. There is a bunch of repos, random repos somewhere. It's kind of be hard to find. But we're going to push in January for this project where you can actually say, out of this cluster running on Azure, I want to join this node. And using this as a basis, you should have that. All right, so that's the direction of this.
Yeah, so I think it opens the door for kind of in reviewing the proposal for cross-resource group nodes. I love that the labels and annotations kind of way that we structure the code opens the door for being able to do one resources across multiple Azure accounts, right?
Yes.
Across multiple Azure accounts, across multiple regions. Heck, why not start connecting cloud providers? Why not run things on-prem, right? So the way it's structured right now opens the door for having this idea of a hybrid cloud with Azure as the base.
Some customers came and talked with us and with me personally, and they said, you know what, we love everything. We just have a bunch of machines on-prem, and they're on workload that's arcane or archaic, and we just don't want to move it. We're fine with it. We just want to control it with the cloud. And this kind of approach is what we're trying to solve for, right? We're midway through the journey of giving this.
Yeah. So what are we planning for the next few cycles? From the Kubernetes perspective, we've got, again, that kind of migration of the in-tree provider code to out of core Kubernetes, out of Kubernetes repos. So that's continuing along. That's been going pretty well. I think at some point we'll start looking at cluster API for Azure, if you're aware of that project.
I have news for you.
All right. So yeah, and so these are strictly Kubernetes specific updates. I'm sure Cal has some secret Microsoft sauce to tell you about.
Not really.
But as always, docs are what help us iterate over code a lot faster. So we want to make sure that the docs are easy to read, easier to collaborate with people. We want to make sure that the testing suites that we're using for Azure, one, they meet the bar that we use across the board in Kubernetes. So that means adding more testing to TestGrid, which is the Kubernetes overarching testing platform, as well as starting to explore this idea of what does Kubernetes conformance look like. So how do I build a cluster on Azure that I know is Kubernetes, right? Like what is Kubernetes? So defining profiles for conformance in Kubernetes and then making sure that each of the cloud providers adhere to that.
That's mapping to an upstream effort on coming with conformance profiles, right?
Yes. Yes. And then finally, so in the spirit of conformance and collaboration and community and making sure we have consistent guidelines for the way that we structure Kubernetes and deliver Kubernetes code on cloud providers, we spun up a SIG cloud provider, and SIG cloud provider has a quorum of people from multiple cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft, GCP, IBM Cloud, so on and so forth. So what we want to do is move SIG Azure and kind of slot that under SIG Cloud Provider as a sub-project as opposed to a SIG. So if you're familiar with the governance structure of Kubernetes, we have the SIG is kind of like the primary unit of governance, so special interest group, and then within the SIGs are sub-project groups. So the sub-projects are essentially delegated responsibility over code ownership, right? So a sub-project like Azure would control the code around the external controller manager, the cloud provider, the cluster API, and anything associated with Azure. So we want to make sure that we're following that spirit of community and that spirit of conformance by kind of bending the knee, right? So any GOT fans out there. So now Cal is going to take it away with a demo.
So I have one demo.
Yep.
May I?
You'll probably need that, right?
Yeah. I can talk it, and you're gonna have to believe me. Still one piece, don't worry.
It's our first time on stage, so.
Yeah. So, because it's KubeCon, and the spirit of KubeCon is what's new and what's shiny, I'm gonna show you a very simple demo. So, anybody knew about the LCD stuff that we announced a couple of days ago? All right, so I have a cluster here that's really, if it's still working, I didn't bust it one way or another. Yeah, I'm gonna do, All right, is this good enough? Come on.
Maybe a little lighter, a little higher.
Okay. And I can do stuff like git pull. What?
Huh? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
See, he told you.
I got it. Yeah, I got it. Okay.
So, and then you can do...
Classic demo assist.
Yeah. This. All right. So it's a cluster and it's fully functioning and everything. The one catch here is this cluster, if you're following what we do, and this is manifest, and then I go kube API server. This is really the manifest that runs the API server. The one catch here is this guy. If I can see it, I will point it out because I moved it. So this guy. HCD servers equal HTTPS, Karnak, HCD, yada. And this endpoint is actually not in cluster. This is a master server. If I did sudo systemctl status HCD, there is no HCD running local, right? The entire state is actually saved on Cosmos, and it's here. So what I did here is this is my Cosmos endpoint, right? And this is the Query Explorer, and this is your serialized Kubernetes objects living inside Cosmos. All right? All right? We got a clap. A reluctant one. Hey, I'm going to give you one. All right, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to people who operate clusters, especially large sum of clusters, as you have zero operational data store? If any of you guys did stuff like try to scale up masters, or go, let's say, add 2 masters or upgrade masters, it's always a highly choreographed dance of stop this, wait for the state to migrate, move to the second thing, and it's usually a process that has a lot of cold sweat that to the person who's doing it. This is basically zero operation. Just point to the data set and so on. Also, the good news is if you go to today to AKS Engine, which is the new home for ACS Engine. Don't ask me why we did, because I don't know why they would rename it. And then you go to examples, and then all you need to do is you go to this one. And if you go to this example, you will see that it has only one flag that says just use Cosmos. Right? And that's all you need. Everything is bootstrapped for you. Certs are done right and everything. All right? Any questions, comments?
Why?
Why? Because it shouldn't be hard to run Kubernetes. That's why. That's really it. It shouldn't be a struggling process of trying to worrying about data saved within a cluster, on VMs, on disks, I/O of disks, and all that calculation. It shouldn't be that hard. All right?
Can we still use this if we are not using AKS engine?
What do you mean?
If we deploy Kubernetes our own, can we still
Yeah. Yeah. All you need to do is you go through the ARM templates. Sorry. Oh yeah. Sorry. You go through the ARM templates, and there's a ARM resource of type Cosmos, HCD, but there is a whitelisting process because it's a very locked down private preview to a very selected number of customers, because we want to progress this slow and steady because it's data. And the person who, by the way, built a CI/CD pipeline that makes sure that this endpoint runs is this guy. This guy at the end. His name is Ernest. He's one of our interns. Right? All right.
All right, so
have a question.
we're actually on to questions. So let me run down. Hold on.
So besides saving on the operational overhead of running HCD, what other possibilities does that open for customers?
There is a future possibilities around. Gonna lose a lot of weight today. There is a lot of possibilities that attach to this around the redundancy and the availability of the cluster. I'd rather have them as a future talk after we get this endpoint to a state where we can actually do a public preview, and then we can talk about these things.
More questions? Oh, another mic. Awesome.
Any questions? Kubernetes on Azure, not
Thank
just
you.
on the demo? No?
All right, so
either everybody's happy or everybody's angry.
yeah. Or
Part of the demo, just might as well showing a little more deep dive. Is it only Azure that JSON changes, or it's mostly Kube API and config flags?
So the data source is actually an etcd data source. So what you need to change is the change I showed you on the manifest file, and that's it. The Kube API server manifest. So the way we run Kubernetes is there is a thing called masters, and then there's a thing called nodes, right? The masters, there is a place where a feature inside Kubernetes called static manifests.
yes.
This is what most, or if not all, use to bootstrap a cluster. You run a kubelet, and you point kubelet to a location that has sort of manifests. Each manifest is a static pod. One of those pods are API servers that runs on masters. So the only change is literally 3 flags. You need to change the certs and the endpoint URI. That's it. The change is, by the way, merged in AKS engine. You can actually see the change. Oh, and don't do etcd local because you don't need it anymore. I just assume that this is a given.
What about if you're running Flannel on Azure? There's no support for using Cosmo DB, I guess, right now. We still need an etcd on the side.
Flannel is working on replacing their thing with CRDs, right?
Yeah.
So,
But right now it's really just for API server.
yes.
Okay.
Primarily, yeah.
Any other questions?
Come on, bring the questions. Wanted to
It's a deep
open the
dive.
forum up.
Let's see. I expected trouble because some of those faces are trouble. So, no, seriously, if you have a question, see?
Oh, right, all right.
So is there gonna be a like LCD CTL equivalent tools to?
No.
No
You
need.
don't need that because HCT, CTL works with
Yeah,
this.
I mean the equivalent tool to introspect the Cosmos DB LCD data.
So because the data is, I mean,
HCD, may I?
yeah, go for it.
So HCD CTL works as is. All right. So because again, I'm sorry.
Na, 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 na.
Yes, 3 mics on it. I still have SSH connection? Yeah, I do. All right, so I can actually show you a simple thing. This is etcd CTL command. So, visible? Yeah. So etcd something with cert, something with key, something with endpoint pointing to Karnak. I'm Egyptian, so this is the temple in Egypt. So, sorry, I had to name it stuff I know. And just a command to get stuff, so. All right. So that basically means you don't need any tooling, investment in client-side tooling or anything. And there is no upstream changing. Kubernetes, OpenShift, CoreOS should run as is.
Keep them coming, y'all. Let's do it.
Not sure if storage.
Hold on.
Okay.
We got to get it on tape.
Not sure if storage is something that you want to look at in this group or not. Storage on Azure, like the various solutions.
You can ask me if it's too hard. I'm just saying I don't know. Right? Or
As
I
in
don't
like-
have, or if I have a bad answer, I'll tell you I don't know.
Like there are quite a few options, and not sure which ones are going to like move forward and be supported.
Storage? Are you talking about Azure storage? Or are you talking about?
Yeah, there's a CSI way, there's a flex volume way.
all right.
There's
All right. You're talking about Azure Kubernetes storage, the repo we have.
Yeah.
Right. So we started with the entry provider. The story goes like this. 2.5 years ago, we had the blob disk, which was the oldest disk on Azure. The performance of that disk, I think people can tell stories.
That's so great.
All right. Then Azure became the managed disk, which is easier to create, attach, detach, and a lot faster with the premium disk. And then now we have ultra disks, ultra SSD disk, which is 160,000 I/O per second, which is a crazy number. It's crazy pricey
But
as well.
it's
So
tweakable, right?
yeah.
So,
yeah, you can dial the up and down, but the top is 160,000 IOPS per second. It's in public preview or GA recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then because of the storage, the cloud moves at the speed of light, if you want. It moves really fast. And then side by side, we were doing stuff like the key vault, flex volume. So key vault, you attach your key vault objects as if they are disks, file on disks. And we've done the investment into, right, so CSI was happening and flex vol was happening, and it was stupid crazy and a lot of stuff. Now, CSI just GA'd, if I remember correctly, just
They
113.
just GA'd. Yeah.
Just
So,
GA'd,
I mean, across.
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so they've been
Right.
working across, I think, the last five or so release cycles to get it GA. I think the next improvement that we're going to see, and it's not so much an improvement of disk types within Azure specifically, but it'll be the improvements to topology-aware disk provisioning. So the idea that if you spin up a cluster in region blah, that your disks will come up in region blah as well, right? So you have reliability and reliability guarantees around that.
Now that CSI is G8, we are gonna move all our investment to CSI-based interface. All right, and we're actually I am one of the people who really doesn't like having volumes entry, right? Because the release cadence for Kubernetes is a month for batches and stuff like that, monthly.
It depends.
Yeah.
We're so I also run SIG release. We're working on firming up what the patch release schedule should look like. Right now, we're creating a team around patch release and release engineering, and so right now it's one person, right? So whoever gets selected for the release team is basically on the hook for 9 months, maybe 9 months plus, to provide patches and be available to do this stuff. So that's not really fair, and you can't really calculate when people are going to be available. So we want to build a team around that. But I would say it's every 2 to 4 weeks or as needed. Yeah.
So, having that in mind, to answer your question, we're moving to a CSI model where everything is outside of the tree. And I can assure you that the key vault, specifically the key vault, because that decision was just locked down half an hour ago, that next version of it is going to walk away from FlexVault, right? So as you and then most of the stuff eventually FlexVault will stop, all right? And you use the CSI. For now, if you're trying to make the choice, use the entry. And as we move to sorry, I keep forgetting that.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right.
So as we progress, we're gonna be asking you to kindly move away from the entry and let's use the CSI because it has a faster batch cycle. Because we will be in the driving seat for release. We can do out-of-band releases and stuff like that.
Right, so we can absolutely continue questions, but I want to just make sure that you know how to reach out to us. So again, the chairs of the SIG are myself and Dave Strebel over here. The technical leads are Cal and Peng Fei. And if anyone wants to start taking pictures, there we go. Of the homepage. So that is the Kubernetes community website, or the Kubernetes community GitHub page, as well as the Slack channel, and we have a mailing list. Right, so. And if you want to stalk Cal and I specifically, I was like, I need to find a picture of Cal. I'm going to use the most recent one. So that's us. We're on the internet. Feel free to reach out, DM, what have you, Slack. We're very open and available. So back to questions. Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Yeah, no problem. Hold on a second. Yeah, let me. He wants to work out now, so.
Just do we need an invite to join the channel, or we just do?
So all channels on Kubernetes.Slack are absolutely free and open and public. The only channels that it's a community policy to make sure that all of communication around SIGs and working groups and committees happen out in the open. So with that said, yes, our channel is open. Once you join Kubernetes Slack, you can join any of the channels that you want. What's really great about joining our channel specifically is that a lot of the people in this room who are from Microsoft live in that channel, right? So that is like a backdoor support for Microsoft. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, right?
We'll start showing you. No, it's the people who are giving me trouble in the audience are actually the people who answer questions as well. And the good news is they know where I live, so. Other questions?
Yeah, we got time for a few more. So.
All right.
Are you back to being active in the channel?
I can
Personally? Why do you ask this question? So 1, 2, 3. So let me answer this question first. About a few months back, I found out that I get a lot of distracted because of Slack. I'm also not on just this one. There is an internal Slack. Then there is Teams, and then there is Twitter, and there is email, and there is phone, and text, and send that. So I decided to just slim down all my connection down to email and text.
He doesn't Slack me anymore, so if
So
that makes you feel better.
Slack is on and off. Like I go on for 10 minutes every couple of hours, just pick up few of the top burning stuff and answer them. All right. So if you really want me, you either text me or email me. That's better. Or Twitter. Twitter, I look at it quite frequently as well.
By the way, I was just joking.
Yeah. No. It's a valid question because he was trying to. He complained about this. Steven himself complained. It's a very fair question, right?
So just an opinion question. A lot of new ways for deploying in Kubernetes apps as well as Azure native systems like a Postgres database or SQL Server. I know like the cloud native app bundles was pretty new, and then also the service catalog is also relatively new-ish, but it doesn't contain everything. And just kind of curious thoughts on the best way to tie those together, or just, you know.
So I'll my semi-opinionated thing about service catalogs and CNAB and whatnot. I think that's great. I think that we're having improvements to the community and the way that you natively deploy applications. But I also think that it's important to understand what your use cases are and not pick up the next shiny tool and consider using it. So I personally won't be using CNAB anytime soon. I think it's great to try out and provide feedback for different tools. But you know, I know the tools that I use for operationalizing my applications, and so far I'm happy with them. So.
You want my opinion?
I was like, I'm sure you have an opinion too.
My opinion has always been the same for the last 22 years. Use what works for you. Don't worry about what others use. Right? If others are using something you can learn from, use it. If it doesn't work for you, you don't have to use it. I have seen so many shapes and colors of tooling and scripts and MSIs and whatever works. Right? You have to, like, my primary requirement is always you as users of my stuff, the stuff I build, and the customers that use your stuff. I have no other influence around what should I use. And that's my opinion. Okay?
Can I ask an ACS engine question? Right?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Actually, I have several, but I'll just try to do one. Big Windows shop. We have legacy apps, right? But I run them in Kubernetes. So if, like right now, I wanted to spin up like a new cluster to support like a Windows application, right? Which version of Kubernetes would I choose?
113.
Huh?
113.
113. Yeah.
13.
Yeah.
That's okay.
For Windows.
For Windows or something, okay. And what kind of, in terms of like, you know, reliability and stuff like this, can I? Because I work for enterprise, I want to make sure that, you know, if I say, okay,
we'll do the disclaimer of we're not going to promise any hard numbers or anything like that. But
let me tell you what I know.
Okay.
And we'll move from there. The Windows was with the GA was aimed for 113, and then we moved it to 114. And if we aimed to 113 and we slept, you can safely assume that we slept on a very slim margin, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have been working somewhere else or
okay.
It's fair. So it's pretty close. It's not doesn't have the GA seal yet, but it's very close.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Right.
In terms of stability and it's very close.
Okay.
My advice to you, if you're running production prod workflows, then you should probably try ACI for the next 3 months, and then you move to Kubernetes.
Yeah, but the cost of ACI
it's prohibitive, and trust me, I'm one of those guys who are saying we need to give the people more flexibility around cost, but we'll get there. I'm not the person to talk cost at any level. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the good news for you is everybody just wake up, I think, 4 months, 5 months ago and said Windows. And I mean everybody, you wouldn't even imagine that you want Windows. I'm talking Google.
I mean, there are pitchforks, users in the streets.
You wouldn't typically see Google asking Windows, right?
Yeah.
So, but they do, because they have the same, they stand in front of the same shoe I'm sitting in right now, where they have customers and say, hey, my legacy workload.
Exactly.
Now, yeah. One of the other things I will always say is, there are a bunch of things coming in Windows pipeline. I just don't know if they are disclosed or not. That's like end of 2019. That's gonna make even the things that you're talking about, specifically legacy workflows, COM plus, all of that nice stuff that we used to do.
Is there? I mean, should I pick like a specific OS version in my my template for my ACS engine?
What's the one that we picked to finally? Not the one after 1803.
I mean, is 2019 out yet, or?
Yeah.
So should we pick that?
So I have a bunch of Microsoft folks The 219, not the 1803, right? Yeah, the 2019 is the one you should pick.
Okay, pick 2019. And lastly, as far as AKS, when would AKS support that?
AKS is on track to support that for first half of the year. So we're looking at June timeframe, but that's no commitment because the commitment should come from the program managers, not me. All right?
Okay. All right, no problem. Lastly, I'm sorry, I know. We actually have a production Linux. No, we have okay. So I have a production Linux cluster where, because again, we're Microsoft shop with, WinSock and Windows IS. Okay, so that's where we have our students on right now, but we're, want to move them to Kubernetes. So we have a new, architecture that we have now. But what we're having is we have intermittent timeout issues to both Azure SQL and to Azure Redis.
Yes. So that's
this is 111.3. This is Kubernetes 111.3. It's a custom VNet with Express Route.
Yeah. So this is the same discussion we had, right?
Yeah.
So out on top of my head, I cannot tell you the solution is X because I don't see things, right? Yeah. And what we've discussed for those who have networking, generally speaking, issues. The first thing is you walk the path of these. Do you have anything in the middle that says no to you, right? No. Firewalls, IB tables, all the funkiness that happens there. You need to look at it. The second thing is what else did we say? What else did we talk about?
Azure SQL and Azure Redis, intermittent issues.
Yeah. No. What else yesterday we talked about? We talked about this. So one of the advice, and I truly believe that this is a valid advice, is generally speaking, irrespective of where you want, if you're building high-perf systems, if you have a pod or a container pod that doesn't need to go to kubedns or core DNS,
try to
circumvent this and use the host DNS server. I have seen people go as far as running DNS mask as a sidecar, for real, because this is the fastest performance they want, and this is it. So my advice to you is do that. All right, that's the second thing. Only for pods that doesn't access anything on the cluster, you just go out. Okay. Another option is you hardwire the IP, but that's crazy. Right?
Yeah,
that's me. That's me on
SQL
a very late night, and I just want to go home.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you don't want to do. Don't take that for real.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've seen people also suffer from is even in a small cluster, if you have, and it depends really on the kind of API you're using, the kind of framework. So Java is not DNS friendly, right?
.NET Core.
Yeah, .NET Core even is not DNS friendly. The way they do DNS queries and the way the glibc versus the other thing, muscle work, right? It's crazy stuff over there. So while you might have a small cluster with a fairly medium-sized apps, the DNS queries coming to the kubedns are actually more than what one replica will do. So scale your DNS server and look at that. Good news is, as we're moving away from kubedns to core DNS on the next releases across the board.
Okay, so you can scale kubedns?
Of course you can.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So there is a service that sits between you
Yeah.
as a client and the kubedns, and it goes this way and this way. And here's the funny thing: it takes a good 3 to 5 seconds, depends how you configured it, but minimum of 3 seconds of blackout if this DNS replica failed. Yep.
All right, so we've got we're over at this point, but I will take one last question. All right.
I've hired the bouncer. To stop these guys. Yeah.
So yesterday I attended some Google Talks on fine-grained cost analysis for allocation and stuff. So I'm wondering, is this something that it's coming up or you guys are brewing and we might have a surprise eventually? Because we started to do it internally and then I saw, okay, Google's doing it. They talked about open sourcing it. And then I'm trying to see if there's something coming up maybe to aggregate cost data from Azure and then also my pod and my container usage and then doing, I think everyone wants that at one point in any multi-tenant cluster, being able to say, you're costing me that much and you're costing me that much. So you're free to say what you want.
I am not aware of any effort that's happening there.
Same.
I am, what I can assure you is our preference is not gonna be building a thing our own. It's gonna be using something that the community came to a consensus that this is where we want to invest. And I think we've proven that with policy. We're just moving policy controller stuff away from Azure because we really want this to be a consensus
it's a
across
framework.
everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
So I expect to see a lot of service providers, Kubernetes service providers, start to build tools around metering and chargeback across multiple cloud providers. I think what we'll see eventually is it will be an API on top of providers and not a provider-provided service itself. So,
Thank you.
thank you all for coming, and thank you all for hanging out extra long.